Today we're going to be taking a quick look at the camera cage for the Z Cam E2 Flagship series from Nitze. So let's get into it. Hey, I'm Scott and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we do all kinds of unboxings, tests, tutorials, reviews, anything photo and video related. So if you like the content today, please do consider subscribing by hitting the little button under the video and turn on the notifications to get updates when new content is uploaded. So a camera cage is a relatively simple product, and I find that even more so on a camera like the Z Cam because it's just a cube. You don't have to really worry about how it feels in your hands quite so much. But if it does a few key things well, then I think it's going to be a great choice for a lot of people. So we're going to take a look at that today, including the full kit that Nitze was kind enough to send me to check out for this video. I do also want to give a shout out to a video by Flannel Ninja that compares this cage and 6 cages total for the Z Cam E2 Flagship series. And you can see a kind of light, quick look at how each of them compare in terms of design and functionality in that video. I put a link for it down in the video description below. But the Nitze comes in as one of the cheapest options at, I believe it's around $89 for the cage and a few small accessories like the cable clamps. Despite that, as you will hopefully see in this video, and then hopefully after you watch this video, you can see again in Flannel Ninja's video, this cage has quite a lot to offer, and it's a really solid cage. So let's get into the cage first, and then we'll see what else comes with it. So I have this cage on my camera right now, obviously. There's not really much of a point in taking it off. It does fit on there very, very snugly. There are some rubber grips on the bottom inside of the cage that really helps to fit it nice and snug in there even before you put the screws in. There's a screw on the top, a single screw on the top to attach it to the body, and also 2 screws on the bottom to attach it to the bottom of the body. So 3 screws overall to connect it to the body, and it's a really, really snug fit. It's one single piece. These screws here do hold it together. It's actually not manufactured as one piece, but it comes as one piece, and basically it feels rock solid. It's not too heavy, you know, there's not like a lot of excess material here. They have some open spaces here to kind of minimize the weight while still maximizing functionality. It's about 300 grams, and you know, at this point when you're rigging up a camera like this, you're really not going to notice a few hundred extra grams, but you know, it does, I think, kind of strike that good balance between having a lot of options of how you can use it, but also not being overkill. On the top here, you can see you have completely clear access to the record button, you have a completely clear view of the top screen, and of course the rear buttons, although the rear of the cage does slightly cover up the white letters. I'm not sure if you can see them here because they are kind of covered up, but it does slightly cover up the letters that are labeling these rear buttons here, ISO, shutter, and EV, but I reprogram those buttons anyway. As you can see here, I put tape on my cage or my camera if I'm not using a cage to indicate, just as a reminder, what functions I have these set to. On this flagship series anyway, the buttons do also have clear markings on them with, you know, menu, function, up and down, and OK. So most people are going to reprogram these. I think it's not going to be that big of a deal. There are also under this tape 1/4-20 screw threads as well as down the middle here. And then you have 2 rows of 1/4-20 screw threads along the front side of the cage, as well as a 3/8 inch screw thread with RE locating pins right at the front and center. If you want to put a handle or something there that attaches using that connection, it's going to be nice and an anti-twist connection there. On either edge, you also have these 1/4-20 threads with the locating pins as well. Again, if you want to put some sort of magic arm from Nitze or something like that that does have those anti-twist pins, then that's going to be a great place for that as well. While we're on the top of the cage, you can see there are no front-facing screw threads on this cage. I know some people have talked about wanting that front-facing screw thread design, but you don't get that here. For me, it really doesn't matter whatsoever. Moving on to the right side of the cage, they do have rosettes at the bottom on both sides of the cage built in, and I just wanted to show you, for example, this is the clutch handle, and if you rotate this to face straight, I just wanted to point out, it's not really a fault of Nitze. All of the cages with built-in rosettes are like this, but if you have this handle straight up and down, because of the placement of the rosette on the clutch handle, it means that the bottom of this handle is going to sit lower than the camera body itself. So it's going to be lopsided if you're going to sit it down flat onto the ground or onto a table or something like that, which is why I had it rotated at a weird angle before. But again, that's not specific to Nitze's cage. That's going to be the same as pretty much all of the cages that I've seen with built-in rosettes in the cage. So just keep that in mind if you're using the clutch handle. So now you can see on the side here we have a number of different screw threads. We have 3 1/4-20 screw threads, one of them with those locating pins on the side of it, as well as a 3/8 inch screw thread with those locating pins on the side of that as well. This is also a NATO rail here, so while you can't slide it on from the bottom because of this rosette being here, you could attach something that will just, you know, clamp straight on over it and then tighten down if you wanted to attach something with a NATO rail on the side here, and then you can adjust it just a little bit. There's not a whole lot of space there to make adjustments of those NATO rail attachments, but you can use this as a NATO rail as well. Again, you get full clearance of the audio ports on the side of the body here, and you actually still have access to these two screw threads on the body of the camera itself if you wanted to use those. Technically this is the bottom, but I also wanted to take a minute to point out you do have a 3/8 inch screw thread on the bottom here, on the side of the bottom here, with these locating pins as well, and that could be another great place. I appreciate that they took advantage of the space here instead of leaving it as dead space. The other side of the cage is pretty much exactly the same. You have the 3/4 20 threads with locating pins on one of them, and the 3/8 inch thread with locating pins on the side of that. A rosette at the bottom, and this is again a NATO rail if you wanted to use it that way. And you do have that 3/8 inch screw thread with the locating pins on either side of it on the bottom as well. Of course, full clearance for the memory card slot here, which I have covered up with tape. I do this as a reminder to myself what this card is for, and when I take the card out, I put tape on it so that way I don't forget when I get home. This has data on it, and then once I've transferred the data, I throw the tape away. It's just kind of my own little reminder system that I have going here. And of course, full complete access to the function buttons on the side here. Nothing is inhibited whatsoever. Looking at the bottom of the cage, you get an amazing number of screw threads on here. You have a lot of 1/4 20, you have a few 3/8 inch screw threads, and also some smaller screw threads. So you're gonna have a lot of freedom to mount whatever you want on here, any kind of base plate, and you can mount those, I'm sure, pretty much across the board with at least 2 screws to get the anti-twist, really secure fit on there. Really nice design for the bottom of this, nice and flat. There's no built-in plate that you have to worry about. Just a really good job on this. I mean, it's just a big flat cheese plate, but that's really nice to see. So you can use this however you want with whatever plate you want, and you'll have a nice secure fit. So like I said, a camera cage should do a few things well, and if it does those, then I think that it's something I could definitely recommend. Now this has a lot of different options for how you're gonna mount things on here. There are 1/4 20 and 3/8 inch screw threads. What I really like is there are actually a lot of these locating pins, which means that it's gonna be really great to mount things with, you know, anti-rotation in a lot of different places on the top, side, and of course bottom, you know, tripod plates, of course, with a lot of freedom and a lot of versatility in whatever accessories you're using. So I appreciate that, and that's a big check for one of the things the cage should do well. The only note is for people who do want screw threads front facing on the top of the camera, this doesn't have that. Another point is that there's complete access to everything on the body. None of the buttons or ports or memory card slots or anything like that are inhibited whatsoever by the cage. You can still see the screen on the top. You know, there's nothing more to say. Gets a big check mark there as well. The third thing that's not necessarily in the order of importance is that it fits the camera snugly and securely, and there's no play in this whatsoever. It attaches with 3 screws, 1 on the top, 2 on the bottom. Very secure fit. Again, even without the screws, it fits on there nice and tightly. It does feel like it's made very well. It's going to be protective, but it's not overkill either. So it again strikes that balance, I think, of a secure fit with good protection, but also not overkill in terms of something that's really adding a lot of bulk or a lot of weight to your camera. I guess the fourth thing would have to be the price, and some of the cages for this flagship series come in at double the cost of this cage, and you know, they're going to be different designs and different layouts of, you know, connections and everything for different users, but generally speaking, if this seems to physically do what you need it to do, this is a great deal for much cheaper than pretty much any of the other cages on the market. So now let's jump into the box to see what else is included. But again, the cage that I'm talking about for that, I think it's $89, comes together with the HDMI clamp and the, I believe it's USB-C cable clamp, which I haven't shown yet. They're still inside of the box, but those are included for that low price. And then they do have this full kit for a higher price, but still the full kit comes in cheaper than some of the other cages in the market, so keep that in mind while we're going through this. So if you get this in the kit, this is going to be more or less how you get it: a styrofoam cutout in a cardboard box, and the cage was originally in here, and some of these other things may have moved around a little bit, but basically this is what you're going to get. First off, they have this handle, top handle here, and this is a NATO handle, and it just screws in with this thumb screw right here on the side. What I like about this is you can actually loosen this screw right here and rotate this NATO clamp. So if you want to slide this on front to back, or if you want to slide this on side to side, if you want to put it on the side of your camera, if you want to put it on the top of your camera, you can use this in a couple different ways. On the front of the top handle, you do also have, again, this 3/8 inch screw thread with locating pins. So if you want to just put a camera monitor mount here, for example, you can put that on the front of the handle. You also have this cold shoe here. There's no locking pins or whatever, it's just a straight cold shoe. And then you have a lot of mounting points along the handle on the top. side, bottom, and the other side you've got, again, a range of 3/8 inch screws, 1/4 screws. You've got some with locating pins, some without, and it's pretty much identical on all 4 sides of the handle. And then in the rear, you've just got this hole cut out, and I assume this is to save on weight while keeping this really, really rugged. It feels pretty good in the hand. It's got these rounded corners and a little bit of a texture cut into it here, just maybe as like an anti-slip texture. But it feels pretty good. It's long enough to fit your full hand around it, no problem. I like being able to put one finger right in front of this. And if I had a monitor mount on the front of here, that would also support my front finger as well. But just as it is, there's not a whole lot in front of this part here. Again, that's like a super personal weird thing. But again, if you put a monitor mount in front of that, it'll give you just a little bit more of a physical extension that you could really get a good grip on it like that, which is like how I prefer to hold a top handle. To mount that on the top of the cage, you get this NATO rail, and of course the screws to attach that to. It's just a simple NATO rail. The screws go into a sliding open slot here, so you can position this a little bit more freely as you slide it from side to side, or just to fit wherever the screw holes are where you're trying to mount it. Now this is a pretty cool accessory. This is a rod clamp, a single rod clamp that has this 3/8 inch screw and locking pins on the side. This thumb screw will both screw it into the body and tighten it down with one single screw. And let me just show you this real quick. You could then, for example, mount this right to the side of the cage here. Let me lock that in real quick. This rod here was also included in the kit. You can slide that in there. Loosen this up just a little bit. Slide it in. And again, as you tighten it down, it tightens the clamp to the body and also tightens the rod into the clamp. And then you could slide on a follow focus or something right here. So you've got a nice single rod setup. And again, I think the reason why people want a front facing screw thread on the top of the cage is so they can screw in a rod straight into there to get this single rod setup for a follow focus without needing a base plate or a rod block, whatever you want to call it. So this kind of gives you an option to that. There is no front facing screw thread, but you do get this rod clamp here, and you can position it in a couple different positions. You should be able to position it here or here. You can do that on either side of the cage. So it does give you some flexibility in using it like this. And this is just a standard 15mm rod. This is actually pretty long. I'm not sure of the specs exactly how long this is. I'll measure it and put it on screen. But you do get 2 of these in the kit. So you could either attach it here with this single rod clamp, or as we'll look at in a minute, they have that base rod block, whatever you want to call it, where you could attach both of them if you wanted to use it like that with a mat box, or a follow focus that mounts onto 2 rods. In this bag, you've got all the screws except these 2 here, which I took out already for the NATO rail, and you got the clamps in here too, which we'll take a look at in a second. But let's put that aside for now. And then you've got that 15mm rod block that I was talking about. We'll take a look at this in just a second. Let's go back a bit just to check out those clamps, the HDMI and USB cable clamps that I was talking about. Okay, so first up is the HDMI clamp, and this comes in 2 pieces, and you're going to screw those into the holes on either side of the HDMI port there, and then they'll just slide together. And the reason that it's in 2 pieces is so there's a little bit of flexibility in how wide you make it, so that way it will fit a range of HDMI cables. Although I personally don't really use it because I'm usually using this whole V-mount adapter setup here, and I feel like this adds a little bit of protection to the HDMI cable anyway. So this is usually, for me, more trouble than it's worth. But if you do want to use an HDMI clamp, it's a pretty simple one to use. You'd screw it in until it's almost tight, put the HDMI cable in, clamp it closed, and then screw in the rest of the way to hold it in there. But again, it's pretty simple. Then you've got the USB cable clamp here, which again is pretty simple. There are 2 little screw threads on the bottom here, and that will just screw right in to those holes, and then it lines up with the USB port and this other little screw on the top, which is a very small screw. You can tighten it down with your hand, I guess, but you're going to want to use the tool probably if you want to really get a secure hold on that USB cable. Again, I don't really use this port myself all that much unless I'm connecting it to iPhone or an iPad as a monitor, but even that I really don't do very often, so I'm not personally going to use this, but it's very simple and easy to use. So finally, we've got this 15mm rod block I want to take a look at because this is pretty interesting actually. I don't personally use this type of setup all that often because I want to keep my rig usually as low profile as I can, and I don't use a whole lot of accessories that require 2 15mm rods. I use a single rod follow focus, and I use a clamp-on mat box. So for the most part, I don't need this, but it is pretty nice. And I've used a few of these from different manufacturers, and this one's actually one of the better ones that I've seen. So first off, starting at the bottom, actually, you have this RE dovetail design here. So if you do have that type of setup, you can just slide this on, and it has this quick release lock on the side here. and it has some screw threads on the bottom as well, so if you want to put your own Manfrotto plate, for example, on the bottom of here, you can of course do that. You've got, again, a 3/8 inch and also 1/4-20 screw threads, and these are really, really nice screw threads. I know it's a weird thing to say, but they're going to be really nice and strong screw threads there. In the center, you've got this pretty straightforward rod clamp, and you've got thumb screws on either side to tighten them down. On the front of the top, there are a couple of screw threads. I assume this is for some kind of lens mount support, but in the flagship series, you don't need that if you're not using like a Metabones or anything like that. But I assume this is the same product that they can use for, you know, a variety of cages. So that's there if you're using this for some other type of cage. And then on the top, you have this quick release plate to release your entire camera from this whole setup. If you want to take it off of the rods, which is really nice, and you just have this quick release little clamp lever, and you can actually use that to push down on the quick release button here. This is of course locked in here. Take that out, and you're good to go. And this is actually Manfrotto compatible. It does feel a little bit on the wide side, but it does work. As you can see here, I have the K5 from iFootage, and this is Manfrotto plates that this uses. You can then slide that in there and lock it down. It's a little bit tight because it is a bit wider, but it does work. And also, if you're using a different Manfrotto plate on the bottom of your camera, you can still use this. You're just going to tighten this screw. I don't know if you can see, there's a screw inside of this little quick release lever here. You can tighten that down so that way this clamp is going to be a bit tighter, a bit smaller for plates which are a little bit narrower than this. It's a very small difference, but obviously that's going to make a difference when you're sliding in here and needing to lock down securely. So if you find that your plate is a little bit too narrow for this, you can just tighten that up right in there. Also, at the moment, this is obviously mounted side to side, which I think most people are going to be using their camera plates front to back, especially in the case of these sliding Manfrotto plates. So let's go ahead and remove this real quick, because you can also rotate it so it will, you know, match up more with typical camera use. So you're just going to loosen these two screws here, take them out, and then you mount this using these two holes here instead of these two. Just turn that to the side, put the screws back in, and you're good to go. Now, if I was being honest, I would prefer that these two screw threads were a little bit further forward. I know maybe centered doesn't work just because of where this clamp is screwed into the body. I'm sure that there's not space for those holes there, but at least maybe just a little bit further forward just to put this a little bit more on the center. But either way, it's really great that this is Manfrotto plate compatible, and you can switch it so that way you can slide your camera in front to back, which is really, really nice. It's a quick release, which is really, really great. And it feels, again, really well made. I've been using a lot of Nitze stuff lately, and it's all really, really rock solid, I gotta say that. So I know that was kind of a long video for something that I said was so simple, but you know, there's a lot of parts here included in the full kit, and they can obviously be used in a variety of different ways. But I think that's a really good point for this cage, is that it does allow for a lot of variety in how you're gonna rig up your camera, and that's what a camera cage, especially for something like this, should be all about. It's solid, it's minimal in a good way, and it's very affordable compared to some of the other options on the market. Obviously, everybody's personal taste, personal preferences in terms of how they rig up the camera is going to be different, what you need, what you don't need. But if this looks like it's something that could work for you, then I would highly recommend it. I would say don't hesitate to buy it. There's nothing that I found that would really stop me from getting it. So if you have any questions or comments, please do let me know down below, and I will do my best to get back to you. If you like this video or found it helpful, also remember to please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. As always, thank you for watching.